Chicago Bridge Magazine, home of the legendary Roy Ayers, music reviews, interviews, and articles. Once again, I have the pleasure of being here with a very famous musician out of Chicago, Illinois. He goes by the name of SaviorFaire Willams. And today, he's actually, most recently, he's working on a project called the Chicago Gypsy Project that you can see right here. And before I get into any questions, Sam, may I ask you, where did that name come from, the SaviorFaire?
I'm glad you asked. It came from me going out to all the jam sessions in the '90s when I was trying to make my name. I used to get to every session so that I could learn the craft of jazz music. And I wanted to study with anybody that had knowledge about it, and I wanted to be able to be around all of the musicians that were serious about it. So I was going to all these sessions, and then people started saying SaviorFaire is everywhere, you know. And SaviorFaire is a character that came from a cartoon when I was a kid. It was called the Klondike Cat series, and SaviorFaire was this little mouse that was chased by a Canadian Mountie that was a cat, and SaviorFaire was like this Robin Hood figure. And every time he escaped from the Mountie, he would go through the town and drop off all the stuff that he took from rich people and gave it to the poor, and the poor would say, SaviorFaire is everywhere. Yeah. So the first gig that I ever got with my own band as a band leader was given to me, the opportunity was given to me by Fred Anderson at the Velvet Lounge. And my group was called the SaviorFaire Jazz Quartet. And at that time, I was going by SaviorFaire and the East Side Project Band. So people knew me by SaviorFaire, but it wasn't really a thing until that night, because there was someone that came from the Reader to do an interview on the group and do an article on me. And I guess Fred may have set that up, or somebody set that up, and they mentioned it in the Reader. Okay. So because the audience was saying SaviorFaire when they clapped, so that's how it got to be a thing. I didn't actually name myself that. It was just something that came out organically from me being around on the scene. Okay. And having made a name for myself, and then it got into the newspaper, and it stuck. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, since we didn't already went back to the beginning, I'm just going to bring everybody to the recently or everything that's going on. So now that you spoke about, how you got your name and so forth, I'd like to talk about, you doing street performing. And again, also, how long have you actually been performing live?
Well, my first performance was when I was 5 years old.
5 years old?
I got an opportunity to perform at the Symphony Center. I was a part of a group of Suzuki kids. Okay. And
what is Suzuki kids? What is that?
Suzuki is Shinji Suzuki was a Japanese violin teacher. Okay. Who had a concept for teaching children how to play music at an early age by ear. And he developed this whole system that is internationally recognized, and nowadays it's everywhere, but at that time it was relatively new in the 70s. Okay. And long story short, being a part of that program when it first was introduced to the Midwest was what gave me the opportunity to play at Symphony Center for the first time as a special group of Suzuki kids. And what made it really important at that time was it was new, and it was televised internationally on Channel 11. Okay. From Symphony Center. Wow. And that was my first recital.
Imagine being on TV at 5 years old for your first performance.
It was really exciting, yeah. And it was a small group of kids. It was about 10 in my group, but then there were different levels of playing. So I was a beginner at that time, but then there were other levels of older kids that were there.
Right. So how did you get into street performing, and why did you choose to take that route?
Well, since I was little, I've always been. My father was a banker.
Okay.
And my mother was a school teacher. And we were raised in a church. And it was a black church, and it was a church where a lot of the people in the church moved to Chicago from down south. So there was a spirit of entrepreneurship that was taught to me at an early age. Everybody was a hard worker in the church, And the concept was we want to make sure that our children grow up to be able to be self-sustainable and not have to depend on getting a job necessarily, but if they need to, they or want to, then they can also do business on their own.
Right.
So my father, would always talk about entrepreneurship and had me reading books about that. And he was a great example because he had his own businesses. So I always had a car washing business, shoveling snow business, lawn mowing business, window washing business as a kid,
Right.
And, one day, it was probably around 97, 98, I thought, if I'm going to make it commit to being a musician, then I need to figure out all the ways that are possible to make a living as a musician. And so the first time I ever got a license to street perform was probably around 97. But then it wasn't something I took too seriously. It was just something I wanted to test and learn about and see if that was a possibility to add a way to keep playing and practicing, to provide a public service as a musician. And in 2003, I got to go on tour for the first time, and that's when I saw street performing outside of Chicago, and it was dramatically different. The attitude was different. The musicians really worked together. There seemed like there was a system there, and I saw the musicians and I saw what level they were performing at, and I said, why don't we have that in Chicago?
Right.
So I kind of changed my mentality about it, and then I went and sought out some of the older musicians that I saw on the street to get to know them, to ask them questions about how to learn, how to street perform, and what their perspective was on it. And over time, I developed a concept that for street performing that integrates my ability to practice and make a living to support myself and my family, but also as a way to promote what I do as an artist, to interact with the public in a positive way, and to be able to stay on my acts, to always be able to play, because I felt like if I was going to be serious about being a musician, street performing was just one part of a way to commit to always being able to play, always being prepared to play, have repertoire that would touch the common person.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And despite street performers don't get the utmost respect like they should, I know the late great B.B. King, was a street performer. Could you speak on maybe some of the other people that they don't know who's famous that are also street performers?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, R. Kelly was a street performer.
Really, R. Kelly?
Yeah, he street performed in the subways of Chicago. Buddy Guy was a street performer. Sonny Stitt was a street performer. And back in the 50s, it used to be a different attitude about it, because artists would post up in different places in the city where it was known that artists would just be playing, practicing. And people would drive by on the street and hire them for local events.
Oh, really?
I read some books about the history touched on the history that Beneath the Underdog with Charles Mingus story, and also there was some information in that book about Ray Charles, and they were walking down the street together, and they came up on some street performers that were being hired at that moment to go play at a social club. So, back in the day, it wasn't like you had radios in a house system inside a restaurant. It was all live music everywhere. Okay. And sometimes if you didn't have a gig that day or a performance to play that day for work, then you would have to have some place to go, especially being black. I mean, we had black musicians unions, but it wasn't the same type of system as the white musicians unions. It was segregated before they integrated. And once they integrated, then a lot of the black unions, especially in Chicago, were not able to hold out, and they just lost, But long story short, street performing, there are a lot of very important artists that started off street performing, James Brown. Did I mention that already?
No.
James Brown was a street performer.
Long list of people.
A long list of really important. And we had a place called Jewtown, which was a big open market.
Yeah.
And in Jewtown, there were a lot of blues musicians that would street perform.
Right.
So there's a long history.
Don't get entertained. Go to Jewtown back in the day. Huh?
Right. Yeah, I think Ken Burns did a series on that, and you in the series you can see a lot of the blues musicians, you know. So I always felt like it was something I wanted to understand, and now I've been doing it for about 15, 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to take a short break, have some black tea. That's what we're drinking today, right?
That's black tea, yes,
okay,
sir.
That's what we're drinking. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back soon. And again, this is SaviorFaire Willams,
yeah.
the one and only. Okay, we're back, and as you see, we have an item here by SaviorFaire that he has specially made. And what exactly is this that we're looking at right now?
Well, you know, it's a case that I had made out of a Louis Vuitton bag. Okay. The whole concept of SaviorFaire is a branding thing now, and I'm trying to figure out how many ways to connect with other companies to cross brand. Mm-hmm. And I saw in Chicago Social Magazine, which is one of my favorite magazines to check out besides the Chicago Grid.
I heard that.
Because it has a lot of fashion and high, high-end merchandise and stuff. There was an article with Slash, the rock star.
Okay.
And he had a custom guitar case that was a Louis Vuitton case. I was like, man, that would be so SaviorFaire if I had a violin case, right? Yeah. Or if I could figure out some way to partner with Louis Vuitton. And, you know, I reached out to them through LinkedIn connects and stuff like that, and I wasn't really getting anything back. So one day I had this bag. I had this really nice Louis Vuitton bag. Yeah. And I was like, I wonder if I can have this made into a custom case. Right. And that's exactly what that is. That's what I did. And because of that, I actually got a chance to make connections with some people at Louis Vuitton, and I'm talking to them about doing some events. Okay. You know, I'm working to try to get some events happening with them. Right. It's a lot of red tape because it's such a huge brand, and I'm not really that big, you know.
Yeah,
but
right.
but they do a lot of really high-end events, and hopefully sometime soon I'll be able to partner. Yeah, so it was just, it's a prototype, and for the concept, so that I could make connections with the company to throw events. It's a brand that I really like, and hopefully that'll work out. I'm looking forward to whatever happens with that.
Okay, definitely. And as you see, he has his own clothing line here. He has a pullover. He has T-shirts for sale, along with hats. So you make sure that you purchase that. And if someone wanted to wear your brand, then how could they order something like that?
All of it's available at the website SaviorFaire.com. And so on the website, I've got children's clothes, I've got travel bags, I've got T-shirts. Some of the material is embroidered, so you don't have to worry about the logo ever fading.
Right. Yeah.
And then others, there's printed stuff, and it's all season. I've got jackets, full winter coats, all kind of stuff. You can get the SaviorFaire logo, violin logo on any of the merchandise that's on the website.
Okay.
And it's under the link clothing. So the thing about the logo is, I encountered a lot of discrimination as a violinist, trying to audition to get into orchestras, trying to get classical violin work.
Right.
I play a lot of different styles of music, but in certain areas, it was as if, there was some discrimination going on. Sometimes it was situations where, it just felt like I wasn't welcome.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it was obvious, where I would get the job, I would be able to play with the group of musicians, and then all of a sudden, they would have really bad attitudes, or they would be, nitpicking about things. So long story short, when I thought about branding myself as an artist, because I always aspired to be an artist, not just playing in one group or just being a sideman, I wanted to come up with a logo that represented all cultures. And so this logo has different symbolism inside of it that represents all cultures. So when different people see it, they have different things that they see. There's Asian influence in the top in the scroll.
Yeah.
There's the circle of infinity. There's Egyptian. There's Christian with the cross. Right. And so there's a lot of symbolism that I think all cultures will be able to identify. And it's really an anti-discrimination logo for a violin. It's the universal violin logo.
Right. And at the same time, it looks like a violin. It resembles a violin.
Exactly.
That was very
exactly. So that's the concept behind it. I want everybody to have access to the arts. I want everybody to have equal access to playing violin.
Right.
And I want the styles that were influenced by African American culture to be equally valued as the styles of violin playing that were European influence.
Right.
And I think that this was, one of my ideas of how maybe that could happen. It'd be really kind of cool if kids all over the world had SaviorFaire t-shirts. That would be cool.
Hey, that's just highly intelligent. The way that you came up with this, it just shows about how organized and professional he is as a musician, and showing you how you should take this to a whole nother level. And don't think small, and he's reminding you to think big, and anything is possible. So with that being said, what are some of the other styles that you play when it comes to, a violin?
Well,
and other instruments, if you play any other instruments, please mention that as well.
I'm working on guitar, acoustic guitar, and piano.
Okay.
And I've always used piano just at a basic level to be able to figure out chords and to compose.
Right.
But my kids are taking piano lessons, and I'm getting some lessons from them to try to be able to play simple melodies and stuff like that on piano.
Right.
But I definitely use piano to compose. And guitar, just to get a feeling of how guitar players have to move, to chord out things. I'm just working on strum patterns and stuff like that right now.
And you're self-teaching yourself?
Well, I have a lot of friends that are musicians,
Oh, okay.
so I
Yeah,
get.
I'm sure.
I try to get lessons when we have
Right,
rehearsals.
brains.
Yeah. I try to get little lessons here and there, And then when I have free time, I go on YouTube and I check out the different approaches to plucking the strings so I can get rhythmic patterns and just there's some basic things that you have to be able to do to be able to play guitar that I'm working on right now so that I can play guitar one day. Or so that when I get a teacher, then I'll be able to actually practice something and it'll sound like something.
Right.
But violin and viola are my main instruments, and I put in, 8 to 15 hours a day for the last 20 years.
Wow.
To
That's
keep
amazing.
up with it. And I start off my day street performing in the morning, then in the afternoon I do restaurants, and in the evening I do concerts, festivals, shows, stuff like that.
Now that's perfecting your craft right there. So could you talk about your new album called Threads and maybe some of the songs that's on there?
Yeah, that was really an amazing thing, and that whole concept, that whole album came from street performing.
Really?
I was street performing it was 2009, and someone that saw me on the street was representing a company that needed entertainment for the NeoCon convention, which is an architectural and design convention that happens annually at the Merchandise Mart. And they said they wanted a string performance to add to their space that they were designing to win a contest for the convention, because all of the companies were doing showings of their showroom. So long story short, the woman that was a really close friend of the person that saw me playing on the street was in New York, and she was a cellist, and she couldn't do the gig. So she knew me as an artist because she had performed with me or seen me play in Chicago when she used to live in Chicago, and she recommended me by name. And the guy that saw me playing came up to me and said, "Are you SaviorFaire?"
Right.
Like, yes. Oh, blah 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 told me about you, and she said that you would be ideal for this job. What do you think about talking with this company about doing a performance for their show space? I said, that's wonderful, I'd love to do it.
Right.
So I talked to the company, and what they wanted to do was present contemporary music, original composition, to add to this new design, this new contemporary design that they made for this space.
Right.
And I was thinking about it when I saw the space, and I said, or the design, because it wasn't really built yet. They showed me the blueprints and everything. And so the first few meetings I was like, it would be incredible if everyone that came into the space was able to take something with them to remember the event.
Right.
So we should do a CD. We should do something that will create an afterlife for this event, so that everyone that comes in here leaves with something and they can remember the space and they can remember the event. And they commissioned me to completely write a whole new album, 15 compositions. I think there are 10 on the album. And the concept is threads because in the space they had a visual artist that helped to design the space using knitting.
Right.
And so there's threads going through the whole space.
Right.
And it's interactive with lights and everything. There's video on the website,
Right.
on my website, SaviorFaireJazzViolinist.com, where you can see what the show was like. So I had a string quartet
Right.
perform this album with live background tracks, and I worked with 2 producers that were electronic music producers.
Wow. Okay.
I had done a couple of albums with Chris Kramer and DJ Midas Wells, and both of them are working with Plug Research, which is electronic dance music label, EDM label, out of LA, a Tastemakers label. So I recorded some stuff with them, and then they partnered with me on this Threads project to be able to produce these. So each track on the Threads album has a different name for threads.
Yeah.
Coppola Juvent is one of the titles. Gossamer Interlace is another one.
I was gonna try to pronounce say that, and then my brain said, "Don't do it. Don't even try. Don't embarrass yourself on camera. Don't do it."
Well,
so I'll just let you go ahead.
The reason the names are so complicated is because I was going through the thesaurus looking for words to describe the song, but then also have the same meaning of threads.
Man, this man does his homework like for real, for real. If y'all don't notice this by now.
So it was a conceptual thing that I wanted people, when they saw the titles, to subconsciously get that this is threads. It's another way of thinking of threads.
Right.
Spindle grinder is another one.
Yeah, right.
And the spindle is what laces up threads, in a factory. So
exactly.
so that album is, I'm really proud of that album. It was paid for by the corporation, which was a milestone for me, to be able to, I've worked with a couple of corporations, but it was really nice to be able to produce a full album for that specific event, because everybody that was there got a piece of that history, and the company got branded, and I got branded that way as well. So it was a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Man, you are a genius, straight up. With that being said, I'd like to ask, who are some of your influences, and also, how was it the experience for you to meet Roy Ayers?
Oh man, Roy Ayers was such a beautiful spirit, man. I got a chance to meet him when he did his performance at 47th Street at the Harold Washington Theater, and I got to meet him and his wife.
Okay.
And the introduction came from Bridgette Wiley. If it wasn't for her, I would have never had the opportunity to meet him. And I think she was managing me at that time.
Oh,
yeah, she was a great manager. I think she there was some health issues that she had, and we weren't able to keep working together because of the health issues. But she was amazing because she helped make connections for me, and he was just really humble and nice, and he gave me a little background about how he got started, and some inspiration about, don't give up, and make sure you stay focused and keep practicing no matter what. Don't get complacent.
Right.
And just think, well, you got to a certain level, so now you don't have to do anything anymore. He was very inspiring, and his music is, his show, getting to meet him when he was about to perform, I got to see a little bit of the background of how he sets his musicians up, how he does his stage show, and then we got to see the performance.
Right.
But his show was incredibly tight, well orchestrated. He's just an incredible musician and an inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And if people want to get in contact with you, again, could you remind them how can they do that? I know you have the website.
So you can go to SaviorFaire jazzviolinist.com, or you can type Samuel SaviorFaire Willams in a Google search and it'll come up.
That's right.
Or you can go to the groups, the Chicago Gypsy Project, and this group is about to come out with a new album in the fall. We're recording right now, and we just started. We just performed at the Black Ensemble Theater. On June 5th, with the Ashe Storytellers.
Okay.
And that was an incredible show. It was sold out, and the group, that was our debut performance at the Black Ensemble Theater. We just started and it's gorgeous, and it's so beautiful. Jackie Taylor, was just a gracious host. She's the founder of Black Ensemble Theater, and it's a relatively new space. I think it's maybe 4 or 5 years old. Might be a little older than that, but it's beautiful. On the north side, on Montrose and Clark. If you don't ever get a chance to get up there, go see any of the shows that Jackie Taylor has there.
Okay.
But the Chicago Gypsy Project is a new group. For years, I worked with my jazz quartet, had drums and electric instrument or an amplified acoustic instrument, and I really wanted to get back to being able to improvise, but in a natural environment, more intimate settings, and just use acoustic instruments and not have to keep having like effects or amplification. So this style gave me the opportunity to get back into just acoustic playing, but also being able to improvise and swing.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like the Hot Club, Stefan Grappelli, or really one of my biggest influences, which was Eddie South. You mentioned
Eddie South.
influences.
Yeah.
Eddie South is one of my biggest heroes. He was the first African American jazz violinist, and really the first authentic jazz violinist internationally known as a lead player. In the 20s and 30s, there was a lot of violin players. Violin was an instrument that everybody learned at that time, just like you learn piano, guitar, whatever.
Right.
But there were a lot of black violin players that didn't get credit and didn't make a name for themselves. But Eddie South was one of those musicians that actually worked during the height of the beginning of jazz. He had a trio that worked on 47th Street and was kind of in competition with acts like Cab Calloway. Okay. So much so that Cab Calloway mentioned it in some of his interviews about how he had a rivalry going on with that group. You know, the group was called the Albumanians.
Albumanians.
Like from
I can say that with the Albumanians.
Yeah, like from Alabama.
Right.
From Alabama.
Okay.
And so they used to do a style that was called hokum, where they would play a swing rhythm with guitar, violin would improvise, but then they would all sing, and they had bass, and they would all sing, and they would sing these scat stories, you know, like kind of like early hip hop, but it wasn't hip hop. It was, you know, poetry in song. Right. You know, like sing song, and that's how they were entertained, telling these little stories, you know, coded messages like, you know, I can't think of the lyrics right now, but stuff like about smoking herb but not saying it, you know, or having a girlfriend or trying to find a date that night or whatever.
Yeah, their own language.
They had, and so that style was called hokum. So the music evolved from, you know, folk music to blues to hokum to rag to swing, and then as far as violin is concerned, we had the hot club sound that was made famous by Stefan Grappelli in Europe, which, by the way, Eddie South, being international, he got over to Europe around that time and brought jazz violin to Europe. So, wow. I mean, that's what the Chicago Gypsy Project is about.
Right.
Eddie South had an album that came out. He was known as the Black Gypsy.
Yeah.
Because he played classical music so well and folk style so well that when he met the gypsies in Europe, they said, he plays just like us. He's one of us. He's our brother. You know, this is... And he did an album called Black Gypsy.
Black Gypsy.
Right. So this is kind of my way, my humble way of paying tribute to Eddie South, but also to connect current day history with past history and honor the legacy of the artists that came before me. This group is doing a crowdfunding campaign on GoFundMe. It's the Chicago Gypsy Project. We're doing a library tour. Okay. So that we can talk more about.
And once again, we are back with the one and only SaviorFaire Willams. And remember, I really want you to order this clothing line. I already have mine in the making. In the process of ordering me some. Hey, we're in Chicago.
So for real.
That's just something we use.
We on the 9.
We don't bother us. We're in Chicago again. So
79th.
Right, 79th Street. So remember to order his t-shirts. You can order pullovers. Like he said, it's all seasonal.
For all ages and all sizes. We got women's clothing, children's clothing to inspire the youth to play violin. We got male and female, and it's all kinds of designs, backpacks, you know, gym bags. It's hot. It's like it's off the chain.
When it comes to his music, you can order all of his music, and you really should, because you need to hear everything from the beginning to up to recently to what he's doing now and what he's working on. So make sure you order that.
There's 15 albums, man. There's 15 albums on the site. A lot of live performances. I got a three rock albums on there because I worked with this rock group and it was a really great rock group.
Okay.
And I got East Indian folk music album. I worked with Amy Soraya in Chicago who's she's got the most gorgeous voice, and she did a couple of songs in her native language from India. And I toured in Mexico, and we did an album called Huasteco, where the Mexican government funded us to do a project to mix jazz and Mexican folklore music.
Man.
And we ended up doing a couple of festivals. With that, all those albums are on the website. A classical album called Simple Classical Melodies.
Okay.
And the Chicago Gypsy Project is about to drop a new album.
Okay.
So it's plenty of stuff so you can hear the whole
yeah.
journey.
Yeah, and that's you need to keep up with the journey because it's been incredible.
And y'all make sure you keep up with Chicago Bridge, because this is a magazine that really highlights Chicago artists.
And as you can see, the beautiful Latae Holiday is featured on the front. This is our current issue.
Yeah, she's fine, ain't she?
Coming out. Yes, she is. Professional model as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And spokesperson for Sexy Drake, you know. But you can find all this information. It all be inside this current issue. But once again, man, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you,
said
sir.
it.
Hey,
you said it.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, man. Straight
Appreciate
up.
you.
I'm very humbled. And this has been more than an interview. It's been an educational lesson. So, you know, you're going to have to rewind this and play it again, because it's going to be things that you missed. Even me, I know it's things that I missed. And I can't wait to view this just so I can get my, you know, my educational lesson in jazz and all the other types of genres of music you touch on, all through the instrument of a violin. You know, that's just incredible. So, man, keep doing what you're doing. Blessings to you. Peace be upon you, brother. King, man, be safe, and blessed to you and all your family. He has a beautiful family as well. And so, man, I just can't wait to see you live, play live. And I can't wait to make some music with him, God willing. So I'm going to put that out there.
Opportunity, yeah. I'm glad you said it.
Hey, I said it, so you already know. I said it, the poet representing the Chicago Bridge magazine. Again, we home of the legendary Royers, music reviews, articles, and interviews. And thank you again, Sam. I can't say thank you enough.
Peace and blessings.
Peace, peace, peace.